to Aliens Revealed Live. I'm your host, Dean Caparella, here on the Paranormal UK radio network. From alien abductions to monster-infested ranches to men in black, near-death experiences, close encounter experiences and more, we speak to some of the most amazing people on the planet, ready and willing to share their chilling stories with you. And they all come from the Aliens Revealed Live files here on the Paranormal UK radio network. Well, consciousness theory will challenge even the brightest minds on the planet. Actually, it will hurt your brain when you really think about what consciousness really is. Consciousness theory proponents have tried to explain it as neural events that occur in the brain. But is consciousness really attached to any part of a person's anatomy? We've come a long way as a human race. I remember from my earliest age when I used to wonder who I really was. How was I able to think, and why did it seem as if I was at the centre of my own universe? This was well before I hit the age of 10, and I get the feeling most of us have had those thoughts. Today, the topic of consciousness is becoming huge. Just do a keyword search on your favourite keyword tool and look at the number of results you get for consciousness. Consciousness theory seems to have become a battle between what the experts say, the neuroscientists and their ilk, and what experiencers say, near-death experiences, psychics, remote viewers, etc. This topic can really hurt your brain, as I've said. It's deep, it's very deep, but the deeper you go and get into it and realise what we are really dealing with when looking at consciousness, it really does get exciting. When I recently interviewed a near-death experiencer and she talked about herself in two different forms, physical and energy, and as being two separate entities, I was fascinated. So much so that I suddenly became convinced that while we are physical entities on this planet, our awareness or consciousness is the true version of what we really are. It's with us from the time we're born until the time we pass. And as energy, our true form, we live on and on with no expiration date in sight. If that's confused you, I apologise. Actually, I can barely grasp what it means myself. Buddy Bolton's personal experiences have been witnessed by many and are very different from the majority. He's a stellar remote viewer and followed by many scientists for his psychic abilities. In a recent interview with Bolton, where we spent quite some time talking about consciousness, he says experiments and research have proven that consciousness can affect physical matter. Bolton, who is in high demand by some very high-level organisations because of his remote viewing and psychic abilities, says humans are only limited by their intelligence and our tenacity to discover the secrets behind these mysteries. And Buddy Bolton joins us right now. Hi, Buddy.
Good, Dean. Thanks for having me.
Yep.
I have seen quite a bit of your material lately, and I just like the integrity at which you approach the subject. And I think that's really important nowadays, especially. This is a crucial subject. It's a very important subject, and it interweaves between multiple subjects, and they're all important, from the UFO enigma to special abilities, human potential, and they're very definitive connections between them. And it's a fascinating, realm, and we are essentially at the forefront of a new science. Phenomena oftentimes is the very first hint of a new science. And we can go back through science history and talk about different phenomena that were mysteries and this and that. And like electromagnetism. There's all these weird, spooky things that they thought were paranormal even. And a guy named Volta tied them all together into the electromagnetic field. And 200 years later, it's completely incorporated into our lives. It's strange to believe it's only been around for 200 years.
Right. Now, of course, we'll let people know that you're up there in the Bronx, and it looks like the mask is mandatory. Correct. Up there, but I'm sure they won't mind it for a little while. There you go, handsome man.
Here.
What would you describe yourself as?
I don't know. First, I guess I'd be a student. But the stuff I take the most pride in is being a psi practitioner. My mother had a tremendous amount of intuition and psychic ability. And I've always had the knowledge that this ability is real, and although it's not 100% of the time, like, you know, your other senses aren't flawless.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, that stuff's been so important to me, and contact stuff's been very important. And a few years ago, I decided to come out and let people know what I have been doing, what I am doing, and to approach the researchers to get at this human potential. So, you know, to make a long story short, I take most pride in being a psi practitioner,
Okay.
in these different arts. And it's an incredible mystery that we're literally in the front seat of. And we're only limited by our intelligence and our tenacity to discover the secrets behind these mysteries.
Of course, your career was taking a different route there at one stage, but you were heading down the entertainment path.
I've
What
always done
what?
entertainment.
Yeah, I was going to say what caused the switch? I mean, you've given away a possible chance of a life of, I want to say luxury, but you've decided to go down this route. What prompted it?
I've done comedy. That's really my thing, is comedy. Um, when I was a kid, I could notice that my mom was depressed. And so I got up on the table and sang and danced and did all these things. And she was in the middle of the divorce separation with my father. And I think comedy was God's gift to me to give to my mother and to give to others. And so I always did comedy since very young. And after she passed, I kind of lost the will to do comedy.
Mm-hmm.
But I continued and always have been doing this side practicing. And I've worked for some of the very, very best groups and agencies and insane stuff we can get into that's just mind boggling.
Right, right.
But really based in science. And it's hard, you know, this is a big meal. And it requires bites. You can't swallow it all at once. You know, you have to know that first, these abilities are real. There is some strange field, which is the speculation now, or some strange something that allows us to see distant places in times, that allows us to connect without our traditional senses. It allows us to physically affect things at a distance. And, you know, about 40 years ago, the well-known psychics, Uri Geller and Ingo Swann, they had worked for the CIA for 20 years and Stanford Research Institute. And there were two different guys. You know, one was more a commercial guy out to, you know, bend spoons and sell stuff. And the other guy really wanted to go to the researchers, and that was Ingo Swann. And I wanted to be one of those Ingo Swann types. I wanted to go directly to the researchers and the scientists because I knew, you know, I could repeat these things in front of people because I've done it before.
Yep.
You know, from getting a compass to, you know, doing good remote viewing, and not just remote viewing. There's a whole bunch of different types of viewing, so to speak.
Yeah. Can you talk about the work you do with the scientists?
Sure, there's a range of work, and it all depends on the scientists. I've worked with a French group on the growth rate of crystals and algae, and I will not be a part of anything that stunts the growth of anything, even if it's a crystal. I don't want to stunt the growth. I'd only increase the growth. But different researchers are the head scientists from Skinwalker Ranch. I can now finally speak about. Those of you who don't know about Skinwalker Ranch, it's basically the premier paranormal location in the United States that the CIA and the Defense Intelligence Agency and a billionaire all purchased and got involved with to find out the secrets. And there's major stuff and has been major stuff going on there. And I've been working there, working with the head scientist there for, you know, almost 2 years. And wow.
Can you say anything about what you've discovered?
Sure. You know, we oftentimes there's a way to tie this whole subject together, and it's going to take a moment to express it all, but basically there's something called the two-slit experiment, and this is an experiment in physics. And basically, to make a long story short, what it kind of proves is that human consciousness affects physical matter, and that our consciousness isn't separate from the universe, that our consciousness is literally woven into the universe. So consciousness has an ability to affect our surroundings. And some people have more of an ability than others for a variety of reasons. Oftentimes at hauntings, you'll find a distraught young woman or a distraught child. And the way that I look at it is these are creations of the child. They're not separate ghosts or demons from hell or any of that stuff. These are literal creations of the child. And there are other things that can be created by the mind. And at Skinwalker Ranch, the different people who've gone there have had different experiences based on the type of person they were. If it was a military soldier, they would have a very militarized kind of hostile experience. If they were a empathic, caring person, they'd have beautiful light shows or a neat swirl of nature. So, ultimately, Jacques Vallée, who's one of the premier UFO investigators, and Eric Davis, one of the premier behind-the-scenes physicists, they came up with a model of our universe, of our reality, that states that somehow consciousness is more involved than we even think. They didn't take any further leaps, but I take that next big leap and say that there is this ability to do all these things. And the human mind can not only touch different places, it can build things. It can create illusions. And under the right circumstances, it can do some physical things that just would melt your reality. And it sounds too fanciful, but I've seen too much, and I've been a part of too much. I've been able to demonstrate the ability to affect machines at a distance. I've been able to do that consistently. And even when people pray, oftentimes someone will say, would you pray for me? And there's been tons of studies on the power of prayer. And that is acting over a distance. And the power of prayer does help people. There's no question it affects people. And it affects dramatically even. And that's psychokinesis right there, affecting something physical at a distance. And, I think we're so, we teach our kids about physical education as they grow up, but we don't give them consciousness education.
Right.
And exploring your consciousness, exploring your abilities, and exploring this as a very legitimate subject. Now that, there's people who can repeat these phenomenal events, can do amazing things, and it's repeatable. It helps the scientific world because now they can say, like, oh my gosh, this person can do it and can repeat it. Now we can try a bunch of experiments on it and see if it can go this way or it can go that way. So I've been experimenting everything from doing the crystals to remote viewing distant celestial objects to military, potential military threats, to criminals, to archaeological sites. Missing kids, all sorts of things. And it's just been such a fun and wonderful exploration.
Yeah, I just pick up on a couple of points there, buddy, about consciousness being able to affect physical reality. I mean, just using a couple of religious examples, our Creator said, "Let there be light," and there was light, and created everything within, in 7 days. And as far as prayer is concerned, I always believe that you pray from a point that we've already got it instead of asking for it.
Mm-hmm.
So prayer should be like putting your hand in the cookie jar and taking it because it's already there.
Absolutely. And you know what? You said a wonderful quote, let there be light. And there is this whole series of things. We kind of come up with a description of someone called a PK displayer. Remember how I described that girl and she created a haunting with effects?
Mm-hmm.
If you take a human being who is a prodigious savant, there's a long bunch of reasons why I'm naming these specific things. You take a person who's a prodigious savant, you put them under pressure, they have no spiritual release, and a couple other factors, and they can display phenomena. And one of the first uncontrolled phenomena that a person can create is light balls. Now, there's a lot of famous cases throughout history. Imagine you are on a B-52 bomber on your last mission in World War II. You're in the ball turret, one of the most grim of places to be. Tremendous amount of stress, tremendous amount of pressure. Poof. Foo Fighters. Imagine you're a young girl, one of three sisters, and you have a group of people that have come to see a religious experience that you've beckoned them to come see. Poof, Fatima and the dancing lights. You are a nuclear control operator with your key, your finger, literally on the destruct button. Poof, Malmstrom nuclear launch sites, repeatedly visited by UFOs. I could give you case after case just like that, and suddenly it starts to click and make sense. It's very bizarre that this happens. And there's a big mystery in UFOs and phenomena. They have several things that match. With both UFOs and phenomena, the phenomena and the UFO event somehow follows experiencers home with different effects and phenomena. Second of all, it mirrors them, either physically copying their movement, or it mirrors them, like I was saying about Skinwalker.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third one is they're precognizant. The UFOs are somehow know where the fighter pilot's going to go next. Where's their next waypoint? And with the events at Skinwalker, they kept, and still, through all these years, the phenomena was outsmarting them because it was precognizant. It knew what they were going to do.
Right.
Simple explanation. It follows you home because it's you. It mirrors you because it's you.
Okay.
All the different things that they are attributed is it's you. Now, I'm not saying that all UFOs are created by the mind, but even Jacques Vallée and Eric Davis and several others, Terence McKenna, some great minds have said there's a very good possibility that some of the solid craft even may be constructs of an intense mind.
Mm-hmm. A lot of the contact experience that I've spoken with, the experiences talk about being able to, produce a UFO at will. They can walk outside and suddenly there's a craft, they can see it, but no one else can.
Yeah, and you can even have people who call them. One of my memories, I didn't put all the pieces together. It's taken me a while to put all the pieces together, but with my fiance at the time, I was telling her, she was in the passenger seat of the pickup truck. I was like, it'd be really cool to see like a light being or a plasma ball or an orb, and poof, right in front of us to a little bit up to the left was this incredible plasma that was moving and dancing and had sparkles on the inside. I got the phone and I got video of it, and it's on the site. And you can zoom in and see. So, for so long, there's been different events that I thought might have been external events. But now I realize perhaps they were internal events.
Right. Do you do much work with the contact experiences? Do you guys have much in common with each other?
Well, big time. If there is a field, like we're making a supposition for, that there is this field, a substructure that all of us can access on very different scales. But if there is this field and it allows some of the things we know about the field, the ability to see any time or place, to make a physical connection, all these different things. If there was this field, you would expect, in fact, it would necessitate that a very advanced civilization would know about the field and utilize it, like we 200 years later utilize the electromagnetic field. And in UFO case after UFO case, it sure seems that these craft, the more elaborate ones with beings walking around on them around the deck, they seem to know this field, know these abilities, and know, how to communicate. It's fascinating. There's something called remote viewing, which was that program invented by the CIA and actually Ingo Swann, but developed by the CIA. And they would train soldiers. They would train people who did not believe in UFOs. But somehow, after a while, their remote viewing and the use of this ability, the use of this substructure, attracted attention.
Okay.
Perhaps it's a pond, and every time people use it, it sends ripples out there, and maybe they can hear it. So I think it's a very dynamic phenomenon. I've already stated earlier that some of these are very likely creations of the mind, like light balls and things like that, and possibly some solid ships. But the universe is very dynamic. If all of that stuff is true and there is advanced civilizations visiting us, they would know about it and utilize it too. So it's a little bit of everything. There's real stuff out there.
Yeah.
But there's also more power in your mind than you might imagine.
Which leads me to the question about healing. You've done quite a bit of healing. So is this all tied in together as well?
Completely. It's so much of it is about empathy and resonance. Resonance is, when you take a tuning fork, it is able to vibrate and over a distance transfer energy in a way that no other tuning fork can. That's not the right harmonic. And that ability to be a tuning fork, to empathize with something, an object, whether you're doing psychokinesis and you want to affect a machine, you empathize with it, you make a connection, you make a resonance. And harmonics are one of the very few things that can transfer energy across fields, where traditionally you can't do that. So they're all connected. So whether I'm doing psychokinesis on trying to affect a machine, or I'm trying to heal someone, there's different things I do for each, but the core to all of it is empathizing, resonating, connecting, and praying for, connecting to that body, that person, that injury, all of it. Then there's a bunch of other specific things you do for healing. I'm a believer in God, and I won't get too deep into all my religious beliefs, but I always give credit to God. It's not me doing all these things. God gave us all these gifts, and I'm so deeply thankful and humbled to be out there showing our potential and to be a part of, there's a great quote that a pastor once said to me. He's like, God has tremendous power in his hands. The problem is you are his hands.
Right.
And so these abilities are all connected at the core with empathy and resonance.
Okay. What about your work in the remote viewing field? Is this similar to, say, what guys like Stephen Greer do and take groups out to isolated places? And
that's CE5, and I've done that, and I have a farm, and I did that with a group upstate, and we would, do the contact and, protocols, and we'd have a lot of really interesting experiences. But RV, remote viewing, is a specific psychic protocol, an ESP protocol developed with the CIA and used by the CIA and the Defense Intelligence Agency and a whole bunch of different departments throughout the US government for 20 years. They spent millions and millions and millions on it. And all the paperwork now is out, and you can read it, and you can see you can be sure that the CIA wasn't doing that project for 20 years without very good belief that it works. And Jimmy Carter, in fact, said that the most amazing thing in his presidency was seeing this group do what they did. There's a great documentary out from Lance Munguia right now called Third Eye Spies. And it's a straight documentary about the facts surrounding these psychic spies that worked for the US government and the amazing stuff they accomplished. And it's a mind blower,
Are you doing work for the government as well?
I can't really comment on any of that stuff,
Okay. Yep.
If I was or had in the past or in the future, but I've worked with a lot of the top groups and things, and I have in the past worked for a government, organization, and that's why I initially got my moniker, which was Psychic X. Different people were, Psychic A, B, C, D, whatever, and I wanted to be X.
Right.
And that way it keeps you anonymous in all the paperwork. And that's an additional thing. So remote viewing is a protocol. It's basically a 7-page method that you can teach anybody, and it produces stunning data, staggering data. And there's not just remote viewing. Oftentimes people say, oh, I do remote viewing. There's controlled remote viewing. There's associative remote viewing. There's astral projection, which is a very different form and way of getting information. There's a bunch of different types of these clairvoyant methods, and they're very specific methods. And it's really cool. It's really cool. When you teach someone, usually it's called beginner's luck. In this world, people have stunning accuracy.
Right. And so when you say you can teach anybody to do it, a lot of people would say, no, you can't, because I'm not built to do it.
Well, if you say that, you're going to completely deny the possibility. It's like saying, oh, I can't bicycle ride. You never tried it. Well, you may fall down a few times, but I bet you can bicycle ride. But your biggest hindrance is saying, I can't do it.
Right.
I can't. To me, failure and impossible only live in my fears. You have to dream big, and you have to be willing to fail big. And I'm not afraid of failing big. And I wasn't afraid of going to researchers, the scientists. I've been to labs where they've, tested me. There's a great little video, and they mentioned one of the big organizations that they shouldn't have on the tape, but it's on there, testing the shielded compass, and they tested me on an electrostatic detector and all sorts of different equipment. And it's so cool. Anyone can learn this stuff. I've taught people different aspects of this, and what they've done and what they're doing now is amazing, just like I've been taught. So this, you can, Dean, you can. Your biggest handicap is saying, oh, no, I can't do it.
Yeah. Okay.
If you watch the documentary Third Eye Spies, you'll see how exciting and amazing this stuff is. And there's lots of testimonials on my, channel of things I've gotten incredibly accurate. And, it's not just a parlor trick. It also can have a lot of value in terms of helping people, finding lost people, finding a lost kid. I just got asked to help find basically endangered plant species. How cool is that?
Wow.
I've been asked and have done the viewings for a historical society. And how fun and cool is that?
So I was just going to ask you, buddy, can you give us like an example of how you would prepare to do a remote viewing? Say you needed to find a plant. What would be your preparation?
Well, I made a big discovery a while ago. I used to have incredibly long preparations and made sure I did it during this special time called sidereal time, which is, and I'd have to have my mugwort tea and do my yoga beforehand and do all these different things until one day the head scientist from Skinwalker called me out of the blue and said, "Hey, do you want to do something?" I was like, "Sure, I'm always game. I'm not afraid of failing, you know." And it ended up being a 2-hour session with over 16 targets, and I hit them all.
Wow.
And I've got drawings of them. And another scientist came in and was trying to trick me, and I got all sorts of information, not just visual information, but information about his wife and their unusual marriage relationship. Just incident after incident, thing after thing, you're able to acquire this information. And I was using a very quick technique, and one that I'm very familiar with, astral projection. And it's as simple as me taking a minute just to take a breath or two and calm down, get to the space that I've been to a million times, and go and see what the gestalts are. The wonderful thing is that, and people will tell you this when they're working in the psychic realms, that there's something called a gestalt.
Mm-hmm.
And a gestalt is your very first impression, something that leaps to you, a thought that comes to you. You don't go hunt it down. And you spend a lot of time when working on remote viewing and different esoteric stuff, signal to noise ratio, all that stuff. And it's really about getting things as quiet as you can be. Get your busy, human mind calmed at the surface, your upper consciousness, and then let your subconscious do the work for you and answer questions for you. And for some wacky reason, the subconscious is, and they call it a gestalt, is, right 95% of the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you want to go on to something and said, "Buddy, help me find this plant," it'd take me, less than, 20 seconds to start. But I'm very different than the average. I've built up a lot of different things, and but I do think it's true with everyone that it's good not to over prepare and freak yourself out and stress yourself out. Just dive in and go with it and have fun.
You're onto a new venture, I understand. What we've been talking about, is this all part of the intuitive technology that you talk about?
Correct. I've been working with a scientist out of Canada who runs several different companies, and he's just an absolute amazing. He's a prodigious savant and just absolutely amazing and young. Those really annoyingly young, incredibly successful, smart, handsome, fast.
Yep. I know them well.
And we went down to these labs in Huntsville, Alabama, which is, of course, the premier rocketry location in the U.S. And on the way back, we had a crazy UFO encounter. We've had several really big UFO encounters. And after that trip, for the next week, I came up with 75 inventions just poured out of me. I just couldn't stop. It was like I couldn't stop. And this gentleman, scientist, had a bunch of ideas as well, too, and said, and went through these, little blueprints I made up and said, "This is great. Let's try and go out there and sell these." And they're products that should be profitable, but also help the world. All of them. None of them are strictly, Psychic X shampoo and conditioner.
Yeah. Okay. I've been reading about some of the amazing work you do where you're situated at the moment. I read with interest about a lady who had no money and where you gave her your last dollar or helped her buy a lottery ticket and she won, and then 4 days later you repeated the dose. I often wonder, buddy, with your abilities, do you fear, there are unscrupulous people out there who maybe would like to get their hands on you and put you in a box somewhere and use it for their own purposes?
Well, you could never put me in a box and have me do what they want. You know, you're going to affect my, you know, a million. Fortunately, it's one of those things that you can't make me do.
Yeah.
I don't have family you can torture. And my wiener dog is 17 years old.
Wow.
And, you know, I want to help. I'm here to help.
Buddy, what about people who want to learn more about this? I know you've done quite a bit of work with a Dr. Simeon Hine. How would people pursue this further?
Well, it depends what they want to do. You know, if they want to do healing, there's different places they can go to learn that. If you want to learn remote viewing, there's really only one person that I recommend, and that's Dr. Simeon Hine. His method is Ingo Swann's method. He knew Ingo, he trained in Ingo's method, and with just some minor improvements, he's the only one who teaches the most true version of controlled remote viewing, CRV. And you can pay bunches of money, you know, thousands of dollars out there with different teachers and things like that. But if you go to Dr. Hine's websites, I think it's newcrystalmind.com, maybe. He's got tons of free videos on it. So you can learn the basics just from all of these free videos. There's real live in-person classes too. And I go to classes. I'm constantly training. Even though I'm quote unquote a professional and I worked for and done wacky, fun, amazing stuff, I'm always a student. I'm always learning. Mm-hmm. And I'm never going to turn down an opportunity. And anyway, in that wanting to be a student all the time, I've gone to Dr. Simeon Hine's classes, and they're absolutely amazing. They changed my ability and improved my ability. And I have a bond with Ingo Swann. And so to get this kind of wonderful information from the inventor of the method, handed down to Simeon Hine, and from Simeon handed to me, mm-hmm. It's wonderful, and to all of his students. It's pretty amazing. Ingo Swann used to be able to do all these incredible things that I'm able to demonstrate to, affecting machines and all these different things at a distance. And when you really think about it, if you're able to affect a machine that's distant from you, somehow a part of you is connecting to that. You know, a lump of you is here, but a part of you is connecting to that. And I realized something when Ingo Swann passed away, which was January 30th, is his death date. The lump here disappeared, but he was a lot more every place else.
Right.
And that's true with all of us, I think. I think there's a chunk of us here and a little piece of us that straddles into this field. And, you know, when you pass, maybe you straddle more in that field.
Yeah.
And you're more everywhere.
Okay. Couple more questions. You mentioned when you pass, have you done much work with near-death experiences?
Not too much. I've done, tried to do some contact work and for people who specifically requested try to get in contact with a loved one. And it's something I was incredibly reticent to do because, you know, the last thing I want to do is be one of those. There was a guy on TV named Jonathan Edwards, I think mm-hmm. it was. Now, these people who contact past lives and profiteer and do really kind of disgusting things like that. I didn't want to do that. If I couldn't get a real signal and my gestalts flow organically, gestalts be real, this is people's feelings. You know, this is really heavy duty stuff.
Yeah.
So took it on for 3 cases and I had stunning results, down to the name of a dog even, and musical instruments and all sorts of different things. But that's one of the toughest, and just in terms of wrapping your head around it all.
Yeah, I was thinking more along the lines of NDEs who come back, and I hear a lot of them say that when they come back, they see themselves now as two identities, as consciousness and as a physical body. And it's almost, it gets to a point where they're swayed to thinking they're more consciousness than they are the physical body, which is just carrying them around.
You know, this is such a wonderful debate in the science community as well, too, about consciousness and space-time matter energy. You know, you can't have a consciousness, you can't have a biological system unless you have space-time matter and energy first. But we've discovered that, and it's just logic too, space-time matter and energy is completely meaningless if there's not a consciousness to perceive it. And so to me, I believe it's a tightly woven tapestry. It's not one before the other. It's a tightly woven tapestry. And because of that, you can touch over here and affect over there. You can see something here and also see it way over here. Nargajuna, you know, this stuff tracks very well with a lot of ancient thought. 2,000 years ago, Nargajuna, and you can read this in the Yoga Sutras, said, if you still your mind like the surface of a lake, you can reflect the universe. And that's the heart of so much of this stuff, is stilling your mind and letting that gestalt and the universe come to you. You don't have to hunt desperately, search for these things. Let it just come to you. And the Yoga Sutras talk about empathy and the path of virtue. And when you walk the path of virtue and you have empathy for all the things you see around you, you will notice these abilities. And they said in this 2,000-year-old document, you will be able to communicate to another student in another village. You will be able to see places that you've never been. And this was, you know, written up 2,000 years ago. And, you know, we're a little slow here in the West, I guess.
Yep. Couple more questions. Do you have to deal a lot with skeptics? I mean, they can be pretty brutal.
They can, but you know what? The facts are facts. You know, you can have your opinion, but you can't have your own facts. Like, you know, you can, but you're, you know, deceiving yourself. And this stuff has so much incontrovertible evidence, so much evidence that you just can't shoot down. The UFO topic has so much hardcore evidence, it's ridiculous. I could go through, you know, the top 5 things about it. With psychic abilities and powers, they've been studying human beings' ability to affect dice at universities for over 150 years. And it proves the human mind can affect the roll of dice. Not massively, but it's a statistical reality. In study after study, you know, the power of prayer. Prayer has been studied again and again and again. All these things, you know, you can prove that this has been studied. To me, this is science. None of this is woo-woo. To me, all of this stuff boils down to science. And I believe that, you know, there is this field. And that field is how we connect with these different places and times. And just like Volta believed there was a field 200 years ago, I think we're dealing with another one now that has certain qualities that we know already. But we need to do some math and some other things to nail down this field.
Last question. Where do you think we are headed on as a planet, and the way things stand now? Are we in trouble?
Well, oh yeah, big time. I don't know. I was just trying to think of the most impactful way I could say it. But, you know, the reality is pretty self-evident. Our animal species are going through a mass extinction right now. The 6th mass extinction of animals on this planet. Population is growing exponentially when we have finite resources. There's a convergence of multiple tragedies happening at once, and they'll grow and increase. And we're such a type of a society that doesn't recycle. Everything is disposable. The pollution, the devastation to our home. You know, it's like we're in the living room playing Nintendo when the whole house is on fire. we're in a very desperate scenario. And when an advanced civilization is visiting you and has increased the visit rate, they might be doing something interesting or important. They were behaving like this 50 years ago. They weren't being captured as much in giant fleets and going, scanning rainforests and scanning, natural zones. I think even their presence and their increased presence is indicative that we're going through something very, very intense. You look out into the universe, my friend, Dean, and we don't see a whole bunch of alien signals, other civilizations. There's something called the Fermi Wall. What happens to these civilizations? Where are they? Maybe the same zeal that allows a creature to get to the stage of super technology, maybe that's, and constant, because you have to be constantly impatient, constantly unsatisfied, wanting to strive higher and bigger and more. When you have technology, suddenly the technology can go faster than your moral arc. And maybe there's very few civilizations because of that. They didn't have enough time, to not just be incredible with their weapons, but be incredible with their ethics.
Yep. Well, buddy, been a real pleasure talking to you. What's up next for you then?
Well, I'm not selling anything. There's no T-shirts. There's no tours.
But you've got a YouTube channel that people can tune in.
Absolutely, the Alien Protocols channel. And if you need healing, if you need remote viewing, if you want tips on all of this stuff or any of this stuff, if you want tips on healing techniques, if you want tips on meditation, if you're just mildly curious or interested, you could email us at alienprotocols@gmail.com. And it's our honor and duty to help and share. Every day I go on a patrol out here in the Bronx to try and help someone. Let God take me to whoever needs help. And wonderful, wonderful things happen. Just jumping out there and doing it. So try it. Jump out there, do it, guys. Let it take you and just follow that spirit and learn one of these things. And we'd be glad to help. Never a charge.
Great. Thanks, buddy.
Thank you, Dean.
That's Buddy Bolton. I recently did a story about Henry Sangmaster's amazing 2017 UFO encounter. It is one of the most fascinating encounters with a flying saucer that I've reported on. The investigator for that case was Dev Rooney. She is the Assistant State Director for MUFON. It's just one of many cases that Rooney has covered in her tenure as a MUFON investigator.
Yes, so I was working.
That's Assistant State Director of MUFON, Northern California, Dev Rooney. Rooney is devoted to her work. She leaves no stone unturned, and like all the best UFO investigators, she approaches each case with a dose of skepticism. It's coming up on the next episode of the Aliens Revealed Live Files, and you won't want to miss it. Thanks for being with us. Don't forget to check out our site at arlhub.com. That's arlhub.com. And as always, keep looking upwards and take care.
Whatever. So he met me there, and he just said, "Well, I hear that you're interested in UFOs," and I said, "Yes, I like to be able to investigate, and find out what other people are witnessing." And he said, "Yeah. Well, he just said that he was in the. Now, when I took down notes from his interview that I had there, that was a long time ago. And I think I was about 21 years old at the time. And I ended up writing down the interview. But throughout the years when I've moved, some of my stuff got lost.
Yeah.
And I, it's a little upsetting because I like to be able to keep a lot of things that I feel are very important, and that would have been very important to me. But some of the stuff that I had while I had moved, it got lost, and that was one of the things. But he said he was in the Navy, and him and another man were on night watch. And he said they were standing out there talking, smoking a cigarette, and looking out over the ocean. There was a moon out that night, so the water was reflecting the moonlight. So that's why they were able to see. He was able to see a lot of what had happened, because as they were standing there talking and looking out over the ocean, there was a light under the surface, and they kind of were like alerting each other. Look, look, look. They thought it was a sub. And he said that they were getting alarmed, because it was like, oh, if this is a sub, or if this is something that we need to go tell the captain and alert everybody. And as they watched this, he said it looked like a flying saucer. He goes, this shit, So I said, okay. And then he said it just came up from under the surface, above the water, and was hovering. And he said he was so shocked at seeing the shape of it, like he realized, wait a minute, what's this? And the moonlight kind of shone off of it, so he could see the shape really well. And they were startled. And his friend was like, do you see this? And he was just like, oh my God. So it ended up just zipping away. And they were there quiet for a moment, like, did it? He goes, we didn't speak. We just kind of were stunned. But they talked about, well, should we report this? And they decided not to.
Right.
Because he said, well, who's going to believe us?
That's Assistant State Director of MUFON, Northern California, Dev Rooney. Rooney is devoted to her work. She leaves no stone unturned, and like all the best UFO investigators, she approaches each case with a dose of skepticism. It's coming up on the next episode of the Aliens Revealed Live Files, and you won't want to miss it. Thanks for being with us. Don't forget to check out our site at arlhub.com. That's arlhub.com. And as always, keep looking upwards and take care.